Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. Back today to do the second half of my wrap up for all the books that I read in February 2025. Getting straight on to the only book that I still have a physical copy of for this month, or at least this section of the wrap up, because I sent the rest of them home with my parents. But it is Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. This book has been getting so much buzz and has recently been longlisted for the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction. It was recommended by so many people as one of their best books of 2024, so I had to pay attention to that, and I'm really glad to have finally read this. This book is set in, I think, 412 BC in Syracuse in Sicily during the course of the Peloponnesian War, and the Syracusans are coming off a big victory that was unexpected, and there are a lot of prisoners of war who have been kept in the quarries in Syracuse, who have just been left there to die of exposure and starvation. We're following these two main characters, Lampo and Gellin, who are Syracusans, who are pretty down on their luck, but who have a love of Athenian drama. And particularly Gellin is really anxious that if Athens should lose the war, then all of the plays and poetry are going to be lost with its people, and so convinces his friend Lampo to recruit some of these Athenian prisoners of war as actors for a production of Medea that they are going to put on in the quarry, bribing them with extra food, basically forcing them to take part, because not taking part means that they are just going to die quicker from starvation. This is probably the most original story that I've read in quite a while, not less because of the Dublin dialect that Ferdia Lennon uses to characterise the Syracusans, and the dark humour that is running throughout this. We are seeing this brutal depiction of what is happening to these prisoners of war, but because we're getting it from the perspectives of these really ignorant Syracusans who just treat it like a game and really are dehumanizing these prisoners, they don't really see the brutality that is going on. They don't realize how badly they are treating the Athenians, and I can understand that this sharp tonal shift between what is actually happening and the tone with which it's being told could maybe rub some people up the wrong way. It was definitely a book that took me a moment to really ground myself and to understand what the author was going for, but once I did, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. This commentary on the effects of dehumanizing others, but also the power of theatre in bringing people together from different walks of life. As I say, one that is definitely brutal and doesn't pull its punches, but definitely worth a read. Next up, I read Poetry Prescription Comfort, edited by Deborah Allen. This is just a short little poetry collection. This is part of a series called The Poetry Prescriptions, in which there's a collection on words for love, words for wild remedy, becoming, joy, and first aid. And the one that I happened to read was The Poetry Prescription for Comfort. As the title suggests, all edited around this idea of poems that are going to give you a little bit of comfort and solace. Poems that both make you warm and fuzzy inside, but also give you a little bit of mental fortitude and the courage to go on even when times are dark. I don't really know what to say about this. You know, it is a collection of poems. There are going to be some that you like more than others. I happen to really just want to gravitate towards poems that I thought were going to be a little bit comforting, and it certainly did its job. And I'd definitely be interested in checking out others in this series. The next book that I picked up was The Wolf Wilder by Katherine Rundell. This is a lovely historical middle grade set in the early 20th century in Tsarist Russia. We're following our main character Feodora, who has been brought up by her mother to look after wolves, particularly when they have been set free by wealthy owners and are basically having to rewild them. However, the authorities are increasingly cracking down on these wolf wilders and making it so that their profession is illegal. Feodora ends up having to run away when her mother is arrested by the Russian authorities, and ends up teaming up with various characters throughout the story who are basically wanting to rebel against this regime. For a story that is intended for a middle grade audience, I was surprised at how dark and, once again, how brutal this book was. Yes, it's a book that's about friendship and showing courage in the face of authority who are trying to do bad things to you and in the midst of unfairness, but my goodness, it does not pull its punches when it comes to violence, particularly violence against animals, and I think it is all the more better for being realistic. But definitely just a little bit of a warning going in, this is definitely for a slightly older child in that middle grade bracket. I really enjoy reading Katherine Rundell's writing. She is such an imaginative author. I've read 2 of her books so far, this and The Rooftoppers, and her main characters are always very precocious, curious girls who have no problem with flouting authority and speaking their minds. The illustrations in this are also beautiful and really complement the writing and the story. So as I say, if you've got a child who is on the older side of the middle grade bracket, who you think can manage a book that has slightly darker themes, then definitely worth checking out. The next book I read was a short essay, How to Stay Sane in an Age of Division by Elif Shafak. I remember a lot of people reading this when it first came out in 2020, reflecting on what it is like to live in a polarized world, and basically, as the title suggests, how we can stay sane in the midst of so much conflict, rather than just looking at the world and succumbing to despair and just completely giving up hope of being able to cooperate with other people. I feel like Elif Shafak is really trying to push forward this message of hope that things can get better, and you're struck by the fact that this essay was written in 2020, and so obviously it is missing a lot of context to right now. There are definitely things in this essay that I think are relevant for right now and that I think are worth reading. But I do feel like maybe reading this essay now, you could be forgiven for reading it and thinking maybe the message is just a little bit too simplistic, because so much has gone on in the past 5 years. So much is still ongoing that I think it's become more likely now than ever to just look at the world and think, oh my god, what is the point? I know so many people who are now just not reading the news because they don't want to know. This being said, maybe this essay will be helpful for people now because it doesn't have that context, because I think there are definitely pieces in here that are worth drawing out: the importance of compassion, the importance of seeing individuals' humanities and trying to understand people even if you don't necessarily agree with them. That does not mean that you necessarily endorse their views. I am definitely glad that I read this one finally, even though there are moments where I'm thinking, oh goodness, things have just gotten a whole lot worse. The next non-fiction that I read was another essay, this time by Virginia Woolf, and it was her essay on being ill. Her short little essay on living with chronic illness and the experience of basically being othered in society because of your ill health, the things that it means that you're not able to do, and the things that other people take for granted about being in good health, and how so often people do not extend empathy and compassion to people who are living with chronic illness, which leads to isolation, stigmatization of illness, and just a whole lot of ill treatment by a society that should be looking after you. She talks a lot in here about how rare it is to actually see depictions of illness, particularly chronic illness, in literature. How often illness is used as a metaphor, either for laziness, for villainy, some sort of judgment on people's souls. But that so often what is most harmful is the fact that it is just not present at all. And it really made me check myself and notice moments in my life where I have not been as particularly empathetic as I should have been, thinking of things from a perspective of, oh well, I can do this thing, therefore everybody else should be able to, and just not considering that that might not be the case. But even if you are blessed to have had good health throughout most of your life, if you are lucky enough to live long enough, ill health is either going to come for you or to people that you love. And so we cannot be just burying our heads in the sand, acting like it doesn't exist in the way that society so often does. It's really sad to read this essay from 100 years ago and realise how things really haven't changed so much. It's one that I got to the end of and then went back and reread, and is an essay that I just think everybody should read. You know, obviously everybody talks about A Room of One's Own, but this is another Virginia Woolf essay that I think that should be on everybody's life TBR. One way or another, this is going to become increasingly relevant to your life, and so if it's a topic that you've never thought about, maybe you should. Next up, I read Dissolution by CJ Sansom, the very famous Tudor mystery series following our main character of Matthew Shardlake, who is a detective who is commissioned by Thomas Cromwell in order to investigate a murder which took place at a recently dissolved abbey, the murder of a monk. Matthew Shardlake goes over to the monastery to uncover what has happened, and along the way is uncovering all of the deception and corruption going on, and getting to see firsthand the conflicts of the people in the wake of the dissolution of the monasteries. Knowing that I love reading about the Tudor period, I've had so many people recommend this series to me, and so I was really intrigued. And what I will say is that it was fine. I feel like the way that CJ Sansom was able to invoke the Tudor world, this Tudor setting, was really great. I felt very immersed in this world, but I didn't care so much for the mystery aspect. And I wonder how much of this is that I'm just not a very big mystery reader. It's not a kind of story that I find really engaging. But truth be told, I found this whole plot to be just a little bit overlong. I didn't really understand why this mystery had to take as long as it did, and it just felt a little bit bloated to me. There's also a romance subplot in here that I didn't care for at all. What I can only describe as a somewhat love triangle, where Matthew Shardlake and his colleague are basically fighting over the same girl, which just went backwards and forwards so many times, and I just didn't see the point of. I found it quite frustrating. There were a couple of great characters in here, but really nobody really drew me in. So I am unconvinced as to whether or not I'm going to continue with this series. Maybe a different mystery, a different story would keep me invested. You know, as I say, I did really enjoy the depiction of the Tudor world, and especially getting to see one outside of the Tudor court. But yeah, I'm not quite so convinced. So let me know down below in the comments if I should continue on with this series. Does it get better from here? I would love to hear from you. And then the final book for this wrap up was Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. Ali Hazelwood's latest romance offering. This time we are at a college in the US, following our main character of Scarlett, who is a competitive diver who has recently come back to diving after sustaining an injury and is on the Olympic track. She's always been a little bit of a loner, but ends up stumbling across a girl on her team called Pen, who has been going through some romantic drama of her own. She's had a long-term boyfriend called Lucas, and it's becoming very clear that their relationship is on the rocks. books. They've both fallen out of love with each other and are due to have more of an amicable breakup. Scarlett overhears Pen telling her friend that one of the reasons that it's not going to work out with Lucas is because he is into BDSM and she is not. Scarlett decides to take her out for a coffee and tells her about her experiences with BDSM, which gives Pen a little bit of comfort and reassurance. We then find out Pen and Lucas have broken up. But then during a party which Pen invites Scarlett to, Pen gets very drunk, pulls Scarlett and Lucas together and drunkenly suggests that they should start sleeping with each other because Scarlett is a submissive, Lucas is a dom, and so they'd be perfect for each other. Scarlett and Lucas both laugh it off, but because of the fact that Scarlett, as I say, is a diver and Lucas is in the swimming team, their orbits always crash into each other and they decide, you know what, might as well. And so throughout most of the book are sustaining a secret friends with benefits situation. And we know that as we go throughout the book, maybe more feelings are going to emerge. And maybe Lucas doesn't just want friends with benefits, maybe he wants something more. It was very interesting reading this book alongside commentary that I was seeing online. A lot of people reading this book and being like, oh my goodness, it's so raunchy. I was not prepared for the spiciness of these sex scenes. And I don't know what is happening to me. I don't know if I'm reading too much romance, or probably most likely it's that I have listened to so many episodes of the Heaving Bosoms podcast that maybe I've become a little bit desensitized, but this was fine. I was reading the scenes in here and I was thinking, is that it? This was definitely not as raunchy as other people led me to believe. So yeah, the spicy scenes were not the thing that bothered me in this book. What I wasn't so impressed by was just how repetitive this book was. You know, I read a lot of romance, so I know that a standard trope is, you know, you'll have these two main characters who just will not communicate with each other, for whom one simple conversation about what their real feelings would be would just completely end the book right there and then. So I understand to hold on to a bit of tension that characters do miscommunicate. But my goodness, the amount I was screaming at Scarlett to just wise up and understand how much Lucas likes her, because the amount that she would go back and forth on, does he like me, does he not, when it was very, very clear that he did. I understand that I'm reading about two 20-something-year-olds who are a little bit oblivious and just don't know how to communicate their feelings because they are very young, but there does get to a point where it becomes a little bit too much, and it just means that the plot ends up grinding to a halt because we're going back and forth in the same conversation over and over again. You know, I definitely like this better than Not in Love. I certainly liked it a lot more than Bride, which I ended up DNFing, but for me this is just very middle of the road Ali Hazelwood. There isn't the same spark that I had in things like The Love Hypothesis or Love on the Brain. I've definitely read Ali Hazelwood with much better chemistry between her main leads and also much better banter. Banter is what I come to Ali Hazelwood for, and this just felt a little bit lacking. You know, the character of Pen was interesting and I felt like she did a bit of a heel turn in the third act of the book, which I didn't really care for, adding unnecessary drama and conflict that didn't need to be there. I feel like the whole third act could have been rewritten. So yeah, it's fine. If you're a completionist for Ali Hazelwood, then, you know, pick it up. But it's not one that I'm going to be singing from the rooftops necessarily. So there we go. Those are all of the rest of the books that I read in February. Do let me know if you've read any of the books that I've spoken about today. Alternatively, please let me know about any that you read in February that you really recommend. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.